All right, we made it to the last review. So this one is reviewing the blog YA Wednesday, or Young Adult Wednesday. Dr. Bickmore's YA Wednesday, to be more precise, focusing on 3 posts. One about what teachers think about the use of YA literature in the classroom, specifically what teacher candidates think, or what brand new teachers think about that concept. And the other 2 are, one is about books on mental illness. He gives a lot of recommendations about books dealing with mental illness, and another one is about eating disorders. So I'll handle those 2 kind of together because they encapsulate a lot of the same themes. But I'll start with the what do teachers think piece. And so, really, it was pretty simple. The criticisms that they line up right early on in the article after just one paragraph, they counter this in the rest of the blog, but they are as follows. I feel like young adult literature is a misnomer. Calling it literature gives it too much credit. I don't want to teach YA. I went into teaching so I could teach literature, real literature. I might use YA with middle schoolers, but I'd never use it with older students. It wouldn't have anything to offer them. And they go on to say that these are things that they often hear from veteran teachers, but that they also heard it from students like me, teacher candidates. And after reading also, I want to just talk about book club again for a second. The teaching with YA literature piece really changed my life. I'm somebody who always hated young adult literature in school. I was so stupid. I really was only ever exposed to a handful of titles, and they all are all terrible because they weren't realistic. Even things like Divergent or Hunger Games are somewhat realistic because the protagonist is in her position as the protagonist because of circumstances that are believable. I remember one book that really turned me off to YA was the Alex Rider series. I'm sure they're great books, okay? I finished like the first half of the first one. And my point in saying that is that it makes no sense why a 14-year-old kid would be called upon to save the world or save England or whatever it is. Yeah, he's the prepubescent James Bond, and I just never bought that. And so I agreed with these criticisms for a long time. It's not literature; it's stupid, right? And then I read "Looking for Alaska" by John Green, and it was a story that was, first of all, extremely well written, and at the time of my life, when I thought my life was boring, it gave me kind of a surrogate to live through for a moment. And it was entertaining, and it really, like I said, it changed my life, it changed my view on literature, it changed my view of what literature can do. And so now I'm much more of a defender of YA. And the blog post specifically highlighted the controversy between people who are like who I used to be and people who are like, holding the position that I do now. And unfortunately, I clicked on the article thinking that they would get some concrete insights on the usage of YA in the classroom, and it would really work nicely with the book club piece that we were reading. I was wrong. She doesn't offer concrete insights, but links to a survey at the end of the piece. So it wasn't really a good read. The book club offered a lot more. Obviously, it had more space to talk about YA Lit. The whole book centered on YA Lit. And the blog post was just, for my taste, too brief. And really just highlighted division, which I don't think is ever smart. What I would have done, rather than a link to a survey, or even if I linked to the survey, I'd add another paragraph talking about the commonality between literature and young adult literature. Talking about how pieces that are well written and written realistically appeal to the very core of adolescent well-being. What I would have said is that the things that adult novels, when I say adult novels, I don't mean 50 Shades of Grey, but what literary novels, I'll use the term adult novels, the books written for adults, what those do in appealing to adult issues, themes. Same thing that YA Lit does for students. If it's well written and if it's literary. Some are, like I said, are extremely kind of a bombastic and unrealistic to why a 12-year-old saves the world. But a coming of age story for a student who's 16 and coming of age is certainly relatable. And why you wouldn't want to engage themes of, loneliness, loss, personal growth, love, sex, different things like that. Why you wouldn't want to engage those themes with teenagers is beyond me, because that's what they're dealing with. And why then, if you're going to address those themes, you address it through a 30-something protagonist's lens? Why not address it through the lens of someone like them? You can still give adult insights into how to grow from there, and I think authors like John Green do a good job at that, at really showcasing where a character is and kind of communicating that that's not necessarily where they should be, but that's where they are, and that's the authenticity of their feeling. And so, that's the kind of content I would have wrapped up with, as opposed to, look at all this controversy, now take my survey and see what you think, and I don't know. But I certainly didn't really believe that it offered a whole lot of insight, just offered more questions than answers, which is why, reflecting on it, I guess felt the need to give a few answers, because there are answers, and the book club text did a good job at offering those. And the second two offer a lot of statistics, one on mental illness, one on eating disorders. 2% of males, 3.5% of females deal with eating disorders. That's actually 30 million people. So while the percentage is low, that's a lot of people struggling with eating disorders. And 1 in 5 students, 13 to 18, deal with what I believe the article calls a debilitating mental illness. So severe mental illnesses that really affect their lives and their lifestyles. What he talks about in YA Lit here in relation to these topics is that some can be triggering. Some can be very negative for students dealing with these things. And so you need to be careful in a classroom how you introduce these texts. What he does say is, and he offers some insights into the content to the books he recommends. He recommends several in each category. And he really kind of asks the question, will this book trigger them or will it assist them? Because he says that when a student sees their problems external to them, so if someone has an eating disorder, for example, and then sees a protagonist in a book who struggles with the same thing, he or she can address that problem in the life of the character as an outsider. And it gives them some sort of perspective on the problem that they themselves may have internalized in their own life. And so it gives them an advanced sense of agency over their own problem. Now that's my interpretation, that's my inference there, but that seems to be what this author is suggesting. They also talk about the mental illness article about how the language we use really communicates our beliefs. So, you also saw this recently in pushback against the word retard to describe mentally handicapped people, because it's offensive and it's rude. And it communicates in a way to many, many people that people using that term may believe that those they're referencing are somehow supposed to be treated negatively. In relation to mental illness, they list terms like crazy, insane, ape shit is one of them. It's just a lot of terms that are degrading. And so the language we use in relation to individuals struggling with mental illness or eating disorders really communicates what we know and what we believe about those topics. And so what this author is saying is that the books that he recommends, he or she, or two different authors. The book that they're recommending could really help engage that topic in a classroom or on a personal level. But for classroom use, they offer a few titles that are about recovery mainly instead of the illness, so it doesn't kind of let you sit in that triggered state It only really addresses the growth out of it. So there's a few kind of lighter options there as well. I just also wanted to address that in the eating disorders section, they deal with being overweight as well as underweight and the variety of illnesses that can lead to both extremes of body composition. And so very solid list of novels. I've never read any of them except one. Excuse me while I find the title. It was in the mental illness category. It was by Ned Vizzini, I believe was his name. Excuse me one moment. It's kind of a funny story. Yes, Ned Vizzini. I've read that one personally. To be honest, I wouldn't teach it. I found it greatly disturbing to me. It's a good book, all in all in the end, but just the whole thing kind of had a kind of dark atmosphere, and it's certainly not something I would recommend teaching students, especially, I really believe that book could be triggering for students. And what I would like to advocate for is a book that, he recommends others, using one of those books that centers on recovery as opposed to the illness itself. Because, you don't want to glorify those things. People are struggling. One thing he does offer is saying that teachers don't have to become professional counselors or cross the line into being experts into these topics in order to have those conversations. I'm cautious about that because I don't want to, again, trigger my students in class based on an illness that they cannot control. And then they'll look to me for guidance on how to address that, and I won't be able to give it to them because I'm not an expert. But what they do say, or what I would like to add at least, is that just because we're not experts doesn't mean we shouldn't know some. School counselors are often available and community resources are available, and so I would recommend that, and I know I would in my own class, take into account these things and certainly have a list of resources or a few phone numbers on speed dial in case students were truly struggling with these issues and I could not help them personally. So yeah, this one's much shorter than the other reviews because we kind of tied those second two articles together. But that comprises the final review in this series. That is the YA Wednesday blog. Again, feel free to post questions. I'll try to check comments, and I'll get back to you again soon. So again, thank you directly to Professor Lucas Rodeseiler, who I know is probably sitting through all these videos going, this kid's voice is so annoying at this point. But just thank you so much for your for your willingness to let us show off our abilities in responding to prompts in a non-written form, in kind of a new avant-garde way. I really respect that, and I really think it's been a lot of fun to be able to craft videos to respond instead of essays. So looking forward to your comments on the content that I produce here. And thanks for listening. Have a good day, sir.